Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for February 2020. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs. By sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs and GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/Rogue Watson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Grayson, and Chris, and gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marco Stade, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, A.K., Cert to be Adam, The Lizard Lounge, Sam, Rosh, and Lumpy Spuds. Thank you all very much for your support. This month's topic, as determined by the poll on the Patreon page, was a damn three-way tie, rendering the entire poll system useless. Or maybe I picked too good of topics. I just chose one. So we're going to talk about level 1. How do we feel about that all-important first level in tabletop RPGs? Is it important that everyone starts at level 1? Do we have special rules or encounter scaling for level 1? And how long do we explore that space before leveling up? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Sean, a.k.a. Cert2B. Hello.
Good evening.
Jordan.
How's it going?
A.k.a. Shireling, a.k.a. D&D for Dummies. Marcos.
Hey, what's going on?
Hello. Tiny.
Hello.
And special guest, you may know her as Celeste. You may know her as Bryce.
Oh, you so forgot the
No,
other
I
names
did
of my
not.
characters.
And you may know her as Miri. Heather, my lovely wife.
It's me!
Hello.
I know her as the person who just always plays a badass.
I knew I liked you, Tiny.
This is true.
And I believe we're going to have one more joining us a little bit later. I think Andy said that he was going to be coming a little bit late. Sean, you were the first one here, so I'm going to punt it to you first for talking about level 1. What are your overall thoughts on on starting a campaign? I know you just recently started one, and you're currently at level 1, I believe, is with Pathfinder.
Pathfinder 2nd Edition, yeah. We've recently done the conversion from 5th Edition to Pathfinder 2e, and it was really, there wasn't like a problem with 5th Edition. It was just, we wanted to try something a little bit new and different, and since I'm the one running the game, I basically got to make the call. Now, that is one thing that I do like about Pathfinder 2nd Edition is, level 1 doesn't suck. I mean, it's still level 1, so you do still have certain limitations, but you usually start with a bit more hit points than what you do in like 5th Edition and basic D&D, because you get hit points for your class, hit points for your con, and hit points for your race as well. So like a fighter with 16 con, a human fighter with 16 con is probably going to have about 21 hit points at level 1.
Wow.
But the enemies in Pathfinder 2 also hit like a ton of bricks. I had posted the last recap in the Discord server, and it was just a CR2 boar, but it rolled a crit and did 32 points of damage. So
Feral
That's
hogs,
my
man.
kind of crit.
So first roll of the game, I down one of my players.
It set the tone.
Such is life, and I actually had them worried a little bit there. But it's one of those things where you are starting out as adventurers, so you aren't supposed to be quite as strong. I think some systems do it a little bit better than others. I know, like in like Shadowrun, for example, you don't really level up in like the traditional D&D sense. So like your number of hit points don't really change as you kind of gain experience. You might gain a few more, but not too much. But I know it can be very difficult. I've seen some players and some GMs just flat out start at level 2 because they hate level 1 to that degree. It really just seems to kind of vary, and it depends on how much challenge you want to do. But it's also a very nice growth aspect. You have a goblin that can practically take off half your hit points at level 1. You face 3 times as many goblins at level 4, and you can just wipe the floor with them. So
Do you have any?
there is that aspect.
Do you ever use any special rules for when you're running at level 1? I mean, obviously, with you rolling a crit and downing a player, it doesn't sound like you were going to take it easy on them.
Well, I think I had mentioned this in a previous roundtable, but like my mindset is live by the dice, die by the dice. I try not to fudge rolls as possible, and kind of like what you do, where you have all your rolls out in the open. I don't really hide any rolls like that. I may hide like the DC for spell saves and the AC and the hit points for enemy creatures, but other than that, everything's kind of out in the open. So it's, the dice are what the dice are in that regards.
Yeah. Marcos, what are your thoughts on level 1 or your experiences as both a player and a DM?
Alrighty, I'm not gonna lie, Sean put it really succinctly right there. um, I suppose I can start as a player. Personally, it depends on who I'm playing with. If I'm playing with a group of people that I know, I don't mind starting at level 1. You are kind of like wet tissue paper, so it could be a little bit honestly, it could just be more exciting, more fun to have death be, a simple arrow shot away that rolls at 8, 8 for damage. That could be fun, and you can play that out, role play that with your friends. But if I'm playing with like a pickup group, I definitely prefer starting a little higher level, level 3 or even level 2 rather, just to give a little bit more substance to it, so that way it's not so swingy. Because level 1, depending on how the setup is, can be very swingy. When it comes to a DM, I more tend to try to run things at a higher level. Um, I always go back to the person who kind of leans back, crosses his arms, and looks at you like, "Well, I'm not having fun anymore." So my goal is to always try to make sure people are having fun. And
Level 1 could often lead to frustration.
it can sometimes, if you have a person go through the whole kit and caboodle, they make their character make a amazing backstory. You know, they're not just some edgy guy from some backwater town. No, they have a whole story, a whole thing set up, and then they get shot with an arrow from a kobold and and they're dead. And then that kind of takes the fun out of it. So if I do run level 1, I tend to curtail the experience.
Or,
I tend to make
or
sure.
have a halfling get bunted across the field by a boar.
Mm, that too. We're trying not for field goals here. But yeah, I do tend to. If I do start a campaign at level 1, I try to curtail the experience just a little bit more. Again, I am with Sean when it comes to you live by the dice, you die by the dice. Whatever happens, happens. But I try to make sure that you know, it, I play the goblins more like goblins at level 1. When you're level 4, there's probably going to be a hobgoblin controlling them to be more precise, to be
Yeah,
more efficient. But at level 1, if the goblin rolls in that one, he might hit his friend, and the friend turns on him. In combat, things like that are more likely
sure.
to happen.
Because you don't
Lower
have to
levels, just to.
you don't have to necessarily fudge rolls, but you can fudge tactics and say, well, I'm going to on purpose play suboptimally because goblins aren't, chess masters, for example, or,
Exactly, yeah.
or especially if you're fighting like undead can't use tactics. So you can have them do, really poor stuff in favor of the players as a way of balancing in general.
Valid point.
Indeed. There's been more times than once that the goblin says, "Hey, boot face, why you hit me?" And then he turns on him, and then the people is like, "Oh, this can work to our advantage." "Hey, boot face, Milky says that you stink and smell bad." What? And then they're just sitting back laughing while that happens.
Heather, I'm interested to hear your thoughts based on the fact that you've been in all of our campaigns and we have started at level 1. What has your experience been with level 1?
personally, I hate level 1. For the love of goodness, it is. I think I'd rather go to a dentist, quite honestly, than play level 1. And don't get me wrong. When we did the first campaign, Fandelver, and all of that, where I had never played D&D before that moment in time at all. I was like, nope, that's not for me. Not gonna do it. So at that point in time, level 1 made sense. And it probably makes sense to a lot of groups whenever you're first joining or you have people that are coming in who have never played and have to kind of learn a little bit of the background rules and need to know how to actually learn how to play the game versus people who are jumping in who have played for years or months even, who do understand some of the basic character creation, role playing, things like that, puzzle solving, that they can then start at a higher level. So constantly having to start back over again at level 1 is, at this point, as you said earlier before you even started the thing, we're almost 5 years in, and it's quite painful to start over again at level 1 when you're like, okay, come on, I can just do so much more if you let me just start at level 3. And it feels like also secondarily that you're okay, this is gonna sound wrong, but let me kind of get it out first.
The safe space.
Yeah. Whenever you are playing with a group of players who do have that experience, who all collectively grown, whenever you say you need to make a level 1 character, it kind of at times can feel like you're stifling the creative environment with everybody by forcing them to be this lower level character, where in their mind, when they're creating this character and trying to come up with a backstory, they see them slightly more powerful at the beginning to be able to have that connection to their character and that story. And I mean, you and I have talked about it. My connection to Celeste, my current character, was very, very weak at the beginning. I didn't like playing this character. I was not happy with it. And then when we started to get in the higher levels, I became more attached to the character and was able to better relate to the backstory that we were coming up with what her motivations were and things like that. Where at level 1, it was just like, well, I'm here. I have a knife. I can stab you. I can't do anything else, but that's about it. So it kind of feels like at times it can stifle that creativity and that role play ability with characters.
That is a really good point that I hadn't brought up and hadn't even thought about. But like, if somebody wanted to make like an old man wizard, like at level 1, I mean, you could make some kind of convoluted reason for that, but you know, it might make more sense to just bring that person on at like, you know, level 6 or something, or level even 10 even. So there are certainly situations where the concept for a character requires them to already have some level of experience, even before they start their campaign. So I could definitely see that. I mean, I do see the appeal of sometimes starting with a more blank slate and just like, well, let's see where the campaign takes me from there and what I actually learn. But most people, I think, tend to have a overarching concept for their character before they ever start the campaign. And in fact, previous editions of D&D, you had to like plan that shit out from the start. Like, you had to, if you wanted to actually like optimize your character, like you had to know, okay, I need this much in this stat, I need to take this feat at this level. And that's one thing that thankfully 5th edition kind of got away from. It's a lot more forgiving, but I could certainly see from a role-playing and even a mechanical standpoint where you would want to start at a higher level. Do you find it better, Hun, that like I think in this campaign of Storm Kings, I think we were only level 1 for 2 sessions. I think we got out of level 1 pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
Still
Fandover,
hated it.
yeah. Certainly for Tomb, I had just fabricated that introductory sequence of the ship, and my plan was like, all right, by the time you guys get to Port Nyanzaru, which is the start of the actual like written published book, you guys are going to be level 2. So the whole like prologue thing I created was just to squeeze in a quick level 1 thing in there, and I didn't want to do like a full dungeon or anything in that nature because I felt similarly at the time like I don't really want to deal with level 1 players very long, and I don't think my players want to be level 1 very long.
We don't.
Yeah.
I will 100% vouch for that.
I will say that I personally love creating new characters. I'm like an altaholic, whatever they call that for the old MMO term, versus like having one character into the like demigod status. I always like creating new characters, but I know that's not for everybody. So, and I would love to just start at level 2 or 3 too, and not necessarily level 1. But some characters I might start at like level 10 because I think they would have, I've got that cool like backstory built in already.
So for me, a lot of the different things that you guys have been saying is really good, but I look at it from very much a different perspective, which is fascinating to me. Hearing you guys say this thing, going, I kind of agree, but at the same point in time, I don't. And to kind of break them all down, like when we first started off, we were talking about combat. Sure, Lost Mines of Phandelver is like walking into the first episode of Goblin Slayer, the anime. Like, you are so squishy that you're just going to get wrecked if you go in there guns a-blazing. You will either die, or in some of the things I've run, your entire party is prisoners inside the hideout because you just don't understand how squishy you are. But that leans into the realism, the gutty realism of the game, how it could be. Plus, it also, with the creativity aspect that Missy talked about, it gets them into leaning more into their background and the other equipment that they have in their backpack that they normally, for the rest of the game, don't give a flying crap about. But at level 1, it's super helpful. And so if you lean into forcing them to use that, and also making sure that in level 1, they're not just straight combat like they will be in the upper levels, but not forcing them, but persuading them to not be a bunch of murder hobos, and giving them social XP to level up out of level 1. So like when I run Portnight and Zaro, all the time that they walk around and talk to different people, they can be getting social XP. So by the time Portnight and Zaro is done and they've done their dino racing and they've done this and they've done that, they're already at level 2.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a difference on just like I said, that gutty realism. And then one other thing that you mentioned, Eric, was 5e, you don't have to plan things out. Whenever I get any player that goes, I want to be a wizard, I go, okay, Harry, let's slow down real quick and look at your spell book. They need to really plan out their cantrips and what they want to be as a spellcaster. And if they're going to be multi-classing, where do you put your ability scores? Because if you ever think about multi-classing in the future, if your level 1 character isn't built for that, it's not an option. Because there's the prerequisites for the other classes. So normally I have people really kind of say, what do you want this to be throughout the campaign? Obviously it can change, but if you're doing spells, let's talk about what that looks like. And if we're going to multi-class, what does that look like so we can build our ability scores appropriately?
Yeah, the multi-classing particularly feels like a weird holdover from like older editions, because like I don't think classes have stat prerequisites anymore at all. They have recommendations, but I don't think you need like a 15 dex to be a rogue or anything, whereas you need certain requirements to multi-class, which seems pretty weird.
They do still have that. You have to have.
They do.
Oh, you do?
Like a certain charisma or.
It's page 163.
Oh shit! It's dropping page numbers on me.
Yeah, you still have that.
I stand corrected.
And the thing is that you need it for both your current class and your new class.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to do a rogue wizard like Mammox is doing, then he would have to have an ability score 13 for dexterity for the rogue to multi-class into anything, and then a 13 intelligence to get into wizard.
Yeah.
So if you're going to multi-class, you have to know the prerequisites to even be able to for your class and whatever class you're going to jump to. So for me, level 1, you kind of have to be it makes it interesting. And it's kind of, from Missy's point of view, really level 1 isn't so much about focusing on the players. That's the reason why so many people say, screw this, let's get to level 2 and level 3 as quickly as possible, because my guy feels weak. And if we're centrally player focused, then most people will just trash it and go. But if you're looking at it as a campaign and trying to focus on the story, then that kind of gives the DM a little bit to say, before we get full blown into this, I'm just going to kind of tell you what you're dealing with. And that's what level 1 is.
Tiny, we haven't heard from you yet. What are your thoughts on using level 1 or being level 1 as a player or as a DM dealing with it?
I just think of level 1 as humble beginnings. So if somebody comes in with a backstory that is like totally epic and they are flavoring themselves as a badass before they've reached level 2, I might talk to them. If it's like a campaign that matters where I'm really looping in backstories and stuff. But it kind of reminds me of original like Warhammer, where you actually started off as like a very commoner class, and then you got to upgrade to be like something awesome. So you could start off as like, a farmer or fisherman or whatever, and then, goblins raid or something like that, and then you're on some sort of adventure and you actually become something great. So I don't stay in level 1 though for very long. I almost feel like level 1 is just a stepping stone to level 2, so I can like say, hey, level up, and everybody's excited, but that only lasts about 2 sessions or so. So it's one where as a DM, like, I don't want to kill a player, so they've got this level 1 armor on them because they just spent all this time creating a character, and they should receive like experience just for doing that. It's like milestone, you made a character, and I don't feel like making a new character at that point. So yeah, it's very short lived, and I just don't stay there as a DM for very long. I milestone them up, and not that it's much XP, but just get through it quick.
Tiny, do you feel like at level 1 the players are forced to do more team dynamics than the everybody has their skill set and how do I shine? Like, how do you feel like the dynamic of it as a party plays out level 1 versus level 2 or 3?
I focus a lot more on just they're leveling up due to their role play versus combat. They may get into a combat encounter. Generally, the dynamics aren't really there at that point. They're all just kind of fending for themselves.
Which is another knock against level 1, because D&D is so combat focused, and the fact that we're all like trying to get around doing combat at level 1 tells me how bullshit level 1 is.
Yeah, well, it's a good opportunity. You can still introduce BBEGs at level 1.
Yeah.
That slap them around, and then they have this motivation to like, build themselves up and then face this BBEG later on. So there's things you can do with it, but I never kill a level 1 character, and it's mostly for me about the role play and maybe one encounter that might make them sweat a little bit.
Piggybacking off that, does anybody have any other special rules or house rules that they use specifically just for level 1? Because I know for our campaigns, we use the lasting injuries. If you go down to 0 hit points, regardless if you ever have to roll a death save or not, you have to roll a con save. And then if you fail a DC 15 con save, you have to roll on the lasting injuries chart, which I can't remember if we use the one straight from the Dungeon Master's Guide or if it's slightly modified. But It's a rule from the DMG, and the rule that we have is that doesn't apply to level 1 PCs because it's just so much easier for them to go down, and it just feels that's just kind of a freebie I give you. Is like, look, you can go down and you can. That's I don't know. That's your special abilities level 1 is you can pop back up basically without having to even roll the save for the lingering injury.
Oh, and you mean the glee you get out of taking down level 1 characters too?
No, there's no glee.
What are you
There's-
talking about?
Mhm.
There's copious amounts of glee.
And
I had
Nothing but
glee
glee.
taking down Mannix's character whenever I did my little one shot. There was copious amounts of glee.
So for me, I don't think I really do the lasting injuries as much as you do. My players have typically not found it super interesting in terms of the role play. They look at it more of just a straight handicap that I'm throwing at them.
Mhm.
So it's more
I don't
of their
disagree.
perspective on that one. But at the same point in time with level 1, like I might make the resting rules a little bit more flexible.
Mm.
But I recently just started a campaign with the one out of Acquisitions Incorporated, where they start by trying to go from the headquarters down to the fissure in Waterdeep. And as they're walking through the streets, they run into a couple of encounters. And I dropped almost 2 characters to 1 hit point each. But in the book, part of the loot was that they found a health potion. So what did they do? They popped it as soon as they got it done with that encounter and moved to the next one. So I'm a little bit more flexible with resting at level 1. But outside of that, I'll still throw at them the same thing that I would have thrown regardless.
Okay.
Like, I'm not going to pull my punches on it because, again, if I'm aiming for gutty realism, it wouldn't make sense to say, and I'm going to come at you with a pillow fight. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I do modify my resting rules for short rests. I just say every 10 minutes that you spend resting, you can get a hit die. And if you spend a whole hour, that's when you get the benefits of, like, say, your class. If you get, a spell slot back or something like that, or unlimited hit dice, which you only have 1 at level 1, but
Right.
it's just like you don't have to spend a whole hour, 10 minutes for your short rest if you need it. But that's 1 hit die, so it doesn't help too much.
It does seem like a lot of class abilities don't come online until level 2 or 3. So even if you have this is kind of partly what Heather was saying about wanting to have a more powerful character concept at the beginning, but like if you want to be a shape-shifting druid and that's your whole thing, I think you can't even do that to level 2. Is that right?
Yep, level 2. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's also when you choose your druid circle as well. So
Yeah.
same level.
And then I get a lot of classes not choosing your subclass until 3. That seems appropriate that you would have to be your generic class first and then specialize in a certain kind of class. But some classes, it's just a bummer that you have to wait a little longer before your entire character concept comes online. I think the only one, Warlock, I think you choose your patron right off the bat because you can't be a Warlock without like having that patron as part of your character. Is there any other class that gets like their signature? I guess rogues get sneak attack at level 1.
And clerics get their stuff right away.
Oh yeah, Wizards loves clerics. Fuck, clerics can do everything. Can do literally.
Sorcerers also have to select their bloodline at level 1.
Okay, that's a good example. You have to do either the wild mage or the draconic. Because wizard, it's not till level 2, I think, where you choose your circle, or is that level 1?
It's level 2.
Level
Yeah.
2. Yeah, there's a couple of ones where it's weird how 5e has it set up where there's a bunch that, okay, great, you pick your thing at level 1. Great, you pick your thing at level 2. Great, you pick your thing at level 3. And that's about as deep as it goes. But overall, I kind of just look at it and go, I don't know if I would tweak that just to get people up to level 3 as quickly as possible. And so, like I said, I kind of just feel like one of the things that I have seen a DM do, which was interesting, is instead of making level 1 super like quick and fast and sorry, get the heck out of Dodge. Let's get you to level 2 as quickly as possible. He basically said the variant human rule where you get a feat is super interesting. So he just gave everyone a feat at level 1.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Well,
Yeah.
it is, but it isn't. Because if you think about it, that's the whole reason why people go human variant. And then they're a lot more durable.
So what do you
level
give?
1.
What do you give the human variant then?
Most people
+1 on
aren't.
all their attributes.
Most of the thing that everybody's going after is their cool, iconic Tabaxi or their Yordle or whatever it is. Like, I don't know, the Kokra or Azamar. But because they like the flavor of it, if no one picks human, then I'll go, okay, feet for all of you. because it's my way of saying, hey, let's make it more interesting and give you something that will give you a little bit more excitement when you look at your character sheet rather than going, we still here? Like, what the crap?
I feel like that's like the equivalent of like a bully, like inadvertently teaching the person he's bullying how to fight with like nunchucks. And then the bully comes back in 10 levels and says, hey, you bullied me around. I know how to use these nunchucks now. And proceeds to wipe the floor with everything. Like, ooh, I feel like that's given, it might work level 1, level 2, level 3, but like later on, that,
Because why is it so different for human variant to get it when nobody else can? Like, where's the plus and minus there?
It's all in the ASIs. It's all in ASI. It's all in when you create your character, the modification to the scores that you can get with your race, with your background.
Right, but human variant looks almost identical to any other difference they have.
But it isn't though. That's the thing.
How?
It's all about balance and
How is it unbalanced
giving everybody a feat.
without including the feet? No. My question is with human variant, why is it only balanced with the other races if it includes a feat? Why is it underbalanced as a variant?
So, for me, I've played a human character. Miri, my monk, was a human, and the other two characters I've played were different races.
Okay.
And I could notice a difference, especially whenever I do a comparison between Miri and Celeste, who are very, in some ways, quite similar. They're both martial fighters, things like that. But with Celeste being of a different race, even though she's only half drow, she's still got some perks that Miri would have been denied without having that potential boost at the beginning from having the feat.
Like dark vision or some sort of martial
some like the dark vision, just some of the different perks that they provide to some of the other races from the beginning. So for example, like with the Dragonborn and getting the +1 to, I think it's to like their HP, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they get one. We've had 2 in this realm of 5 years, and you'd think I'd remember this by now, but I don't. It's, for me as a player building the character, that's one of the first things that I looked at was, okay, what sets this race apart from others? And whenever I chose Miri, again, not fully understanding everything that had to do with D&D, with all the different nuances and the differences that they have, especially now, in the 5 years now that they have opened up the Aarakocra and the Tabaxi and all of these things for players to play as characters, because I seriously contemplated playing a Tabaxi for this one. But in the beginning, with where I was going with that, was just taking each of the races and comparing them. When you just line them out with, okay, Dragonborn get A, B, C, and D, and then half elves get A, B, C, D. There's
definitely a hierarchy. If you're going to min-max, which races should you not do and which ones should you always do?
Yeah,
based off of the abilities that they come with.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's part of the downside with having the human variant is you're never going to play a human because you're not getting half the things that the other ones are. And I think that's kind of probably one of the reasons why they offer that feat at the beginning, to kind of help balance it out, where instead of completely just redoing the variant itself like they have done with some of the other races and the other classes, whereas as they've redone some of those pieces of them, they just kind of have left it to be, okay, you get a feat at the beginning versus us completely reworking the beginnings of being a human in this world.
And keep in mind the feats in general are completely optional in D&D
Right.
5e. That's most of us go with feats because they're cool, but it is technically a variant, and it's called variant human because that's not the standard human. We all like the feat human because feats are cool, but the standard human doesn't even use the feats. It's literally called the variant human. It's like, here's another optional human to use. I don't want to get too off track because I think races could be a whole nother DM roundtable topic, and a good one. So I'm going to try to bring it back to level 1 specifically. How long should campaigns be at level 1? Like, how much time does everybody, whether you're a player or a DM, generally seem to enjoy being at level 1 session-wise, with the caveat that we all have different length sessions?
1 or 2.
Yeah, it's very short, or as long as it needs to be. Once it doesn't need to be level 1 anymore, it does not need to be level 1.
Yeah.
Whether that's through XP, through social or combat encounters, whether that's through you're playing a published, adventure that has specific, when they do this, they hit level 2 or level 3. But I definitely think it should be on the shorter side, because the longer you're at level 1, D&D is about combat.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons is all about combat, and if you're level 1 for very long while doing combat, there's not a lot of ways to mix it up that don't involve death.
I agree with Marcus. Usually the maximum I'll ever go is probably 3 sessions, just because some of the sessions you don't start until after you've wasted an entire session still fixing everybody's characters because they didn't do them right. So usually it's actually 2.
We call it session 0.
Yeah, about that. I've done the session 0 and then the session 1, and one's really like 0.5. It's not even like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the campaign that I just started, that's essentially what we did. The first half of our time was session 0. The second half was the actual start, and we didn't even have combat until the actual second session, because the entire session 0.5 was just setting up the world, setting up the plot, setting up their plot hooks, and then giving them a couple side quests to do. And then once our actual full second session happened, then they have at it.
Yeah, level 1 is basically there to here's the story of the campaign, and here's your initial quest hook, and you do one thing, and hey, you're level 2 now. Excellent. Now we can all breathe easy.
See, for me, with staying at a level 1, kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. As a DM, it's what your expectation of your players are coming into the game. Are you expecting, as a DM, for your players to come in with any kind of extended backstory or understanding of their character, that these are the things that they've been through to get them to this point, that way they can start going on this adventure? Or are you coming in and, like you said, for your session 0, it's just a character creation and now you're here? Because it's very different in how the game then begins to feel. If your characters and your players are all coming in with an understanding and everyone's on the same page of, okay, I've got this backstory, here's what I've been through to get me to where I am to start this adventure, that to me speaks that you should start at a higher level. But if you're coming in and you're doing a session 0 and you're creating these characters and talking about, well, here's what their backstory could be and how they're coming at certain things, to me, that's a level 1 start. That is a beginning. Here we all come. You're fresh out of the goblins raiding your village, and now you're going out hunting type of a scenario, versus you have had a life and an experience that has led you to this point to now take you further in this life and this experience.
And I think that kind of comes from the expectations that we set in defining a backstory, because what you just described was two different types of backstories. One where somebody just says, "Oh, I've done a million different things, yada, yada, yada," or the version that you get from the Xanathar Guide's roll tables, which is, these are the things that have happened to me that have forced the adventuring life upon me. It's not a list of accolades. It's not a resume. That happens at level 1 on.
Mhm.
The Xanathar Guide one is, why are you not with your family? Like that's the question for a backstory.
You see, I
Yeah.
used to farm dirt, and then the dirt went away, so now I got to go find the dirt. So,
Sure.
I love it.
But yeah, I think it's managing what a backstory looks like. That way people don't create an epic adventure that's now reinventing themselves at level 1 and it makes no sense. I think it's more of what's caused me to leave a regular lifestyle to become nomadic and chasing adventure, death, and money.
Here's a question I want to pose to the group, which kind of overlaps with our player death DM roundtable. But if a player dies in your campaign, player character dies. Hopefully, players aren't dying. And they're
That's awkward.
That's awkward. They're dead. No raised dead or whatever, and maybe the player wants to start a new character, and your party's at like level, I don't know, 6 or something. Does that player have to start at level 1?
No, never. That just screws up the
That would be
dynamic of the
terrible.
game. Because then you're pulling punches on one person and everybody else gets the regular combat. That makes, it's more of, hey, I met this guy at a tavern, and look, it's Braum from Game of Thrones. Like, then it's level 6 with level 6.
Ron was never level 1. He was just born at level 5, I think. Yeah, I can't
Only
see.
if you ever want me to rage quit your game.
Right. I
You make
can't
me
see that
restart
ever.
at level 1.
Yeah, I can't see that ever working out very well, having that big of a level discrepancy.
Yeah, I don't know anybody's ever done that in my conversations with DMs. So generally, I think people just start off new characters at whatever level the rest of the party is.
Okay.
Like one time I walked into a gaming store and it was a random DM, and I just joining an existing group, and he was like, "Do you have a level 1 character?" And I just looked at him like, "What are you asking me?" And I was like, "What level are you guys?" I didn't even respond to his question, and everybody else was like 5, 6, 3, 2. Like everybody got screwed up because he would only level you up, and as soon as that happened, I never went back. Because it screws up the game because somebody's taking 15 minutes on their turn because they have 6 more abilities than you do.
Do West March's DMs do that though, where if it's a brand new character, they may put them at level 1?
And I
I've
was about
never
to
played
bring
one.
up, sometimes with the Adventurers League, that can happen. Not to that extent, but there are different tiers
Right.
depending on what level you are. And it's been a long time since I've done it. So I'm not too familiar, freshened up with how the beginning works. But I think it's like level 1 to 4 is the first tier. So you can have level 1 up to level 4 people in your party, all gaining experience. But there is a point where it becomes too high. You don't want to have an epic level adventure, level 11s, and then one person dies, and it's like, hey, you Joe, dirt farmer, you find your dirt? Nope. How about you come join us? That's a bad idea.
Someday he'll find that dirt. Does anybody know of any good level 1 adventures or campaigns in any edition of D&D or a tabletop RPG where you thought this is a really solid little, prologue to the events, or whether you want to use it as a one shot, or level 1 shot would be kind of weird, but or as just a prologue to a campaign, for example, if there had been any good material out there?
So are you asking, just to reframe the question, are there any good adventuring hooks and encounters level 1 in published adventures and campaigns and or modules comparatively? Is that what you're
I
asking?
think that's what I'm looking for, yeah.
Okay. I think it's interesting the different adventure hooks that are out there, but in terms of the whole encounter, the whole 9 yards, everything wrapped together, probably the one I like the best is either Ravenloft or Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Okay.
Just because with those, like, there's a bit of social, there's a bit of combat, but it's not too bad. And by the time it's done, your players are kind of breathing heavy and kind of sweating a little bit, but they survived.
Is Dragon Heist basically level 1 that one bar fight encounter? Like,
It's that bar fight plus a warehouse. But with the bar fight, they're facing something with the CR that would be crazy for them.
yeah, but
Except that they throw in Durnan.
yeah.
And they throw in the other Zentarum agent.
Okay. I don't want to get too spoilery, but I figure at level 1, it's the intro of the book. It's probably fine to get into it, but
basically, if you survive that fight, then another NPC comes up and says, "Here's a mission for you," and then you take that and roll with it. But it's a good intro, good combat, and by the time it's done, you have a story and everything. Like, it just manages all the pieces really well.
Because even the Fandover dungeon, I believe, is. Well, is that first? Is the mine? I guess that mine's level 1, right? The actual goblin cave.
The goblin hideout right after the.
The hideout, I believe, is 2. Once you reach the hideout, I think you're supposed to be level 2, if I'm not mistaken. But you're definitely level 1 when you do the goblin ambush scene, which I think is pretty fun. It's like the one time where it's like, oh my god, goblins are pretty lethal.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything at level 1 can be pretty lethal.
Yeah. You can take a good encounter and not make the focus so much combat. I mean, more add an environmental element to it, like you ran it in Tomb of Annihilation, the shipwreck scene. And that was I'm running that campaign for some kids, like Dungeons and Dads, and that was actually one of the very first scenes I ran them to when I teleported them to Chult. I actually teleported them to. It was supposed to be Sindra Sylvain's ship that was, like sailing to Fort Balarian, and at the time they teleported them, that ship was just destroyed, hit the rocks. So it was more of an environmental encounter than, straight combat. So once they reached the shore, I'm like, okay, you're level 2. Congratulations.
Yeah. Tomb is. I like Tomb of Annihilation a lot, and the intro is horrid. Like, it's just a really, really bad introduction.
Yeah, it's not great.
I don't think Princess had a good one, but I skipped all of them because we obviously came out of Lost Mine of Fandover using that as our level 1. Storm Kings, I wasn't a big fan of the Nightstone town that was just overrun with goblins. That seemed kind of lame.
Yeah.
Jordan, you mentioned Strahd. Are you referencing the Death House dungeon for that level 1?
Yeah, like for me, I personally thought, like, I played murder mystery sort of thing where, like, it's almost like Scooby-Doo. They're walking around, they're not supposed to fight, but if they need to, they will. And so I make it more, I try to keep the creepy aesthetic up, but like, it's more the environmental feeling than it is the actual threat of danger. And if there is a combat encounter, then I'm not going to, typically with level 1 as a DM, my combat encounters, I don't do as strategically as I would do for the other levels.
Right.
For me, they're more of, here's a bad guy. It's almost like a shooting range where you're walking in and people walking around, you're shooting little dummy targets. almost like a Disneyland ride. But once I hit level 3, level 4, level 5, then they're using cover. They're doing all sorts of stuff. So even with the Curse of Straw, that one, I thought that was a good beginning. I thought the Tales from the Yawning Portal, their level 1 adventure, had a good start.
Which one was that?
Sunless Citadel.
Okay.
The other one that was really good was the water one that they released, the equivalent of Tales from the Yawning Portal, Ghost of Saltmarsh.
Oh, yeah.
That one literally felt like a Scooby-Doo adventure starting off at level 1.
I need to look at that one again. Yeah.
You're investigating a haunted house that's tied to spoilers. Mute me for 5 seconds if you haven't played it before. But the haunted mansion is actually a smuggler's den, but everything still feels like a haunted mansion, so it's really legitimately like Scooby-Doo.
Nice.
So there's plenty of them that do it well. I think the hardest part on an adventure hook and starting off with level 1 is making it so it doesn't feel like complete bullshit that just gets you to level 3. Like
Yeah.
it needs to be like a micro view of the overall puzzle of the macro campaign. And I think there's a few that do that really well, where there's actual significance at what happens at level 1, but there's quite a few where it's just complete trash.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just seems like Wizards doesn't seem to care much about that level either. Like, most of the campaigns seem to be designed to start around level 3. Like, I
Princes
think,
of Apocalypse doesn't even hide it.
yeah,
They're just like, fuck this. It's chapter 6. You're never going to use it. Let's just get
Yep.
you at level 3.
well, and Storm Kings to an extent too. Like, I'm looking through my notes right now, but we fast tracked. By session 12, we were level 5. Like, it didn't. Storm Kings didn't give a shit about like tier 1. It's like, look, you got giant problems. You need to be leveled up like very quickly.
Well, in the actual book itself for that campaign, it basically outright says the campaign doesn't actually start until level 5.
Yeah. Yeah, like here's some bullshit things you can do, or here's some little towns under siege, but you need to. And that
Pretty
one,
much.
it seems like that one was built with like almost the assumption that like your player's going to do Lost Mine first, or one of these like low level tier 1 campaigns. All right, we've been going for almost an hour. What are some final thoughts about level 1? We're going to start with Sean.
Well, a lot of what we discussed about level 1, we've kind of already covered. I know the general consensus is level 1 sucks, and I would agree. But I do still kind of stand by my mindset of level 1 doesn't suck nearly as bad in Pathfinder 2. That could be personal opinion. Granted, I've only played 2 sessions of it so far, so check hasn't really been cashed yet on that regards, but it's really I also kind of agree with what was mentioned before about it's more of the social encounter and the setup more than anything else.
Yeah. Tiny, let's go with your final thoughts for level 1.
Yeah, keep it to 1 or 2 sessions and say congratulations, you're level 2. Especially if they're younger, they get real excited.
Ah, good point. Level up the kids as fast as possible.
Yes,
and give them
yes,
pets.
definitely.
I think pets are the other.
Oh, they love pets. Yes.
Jordan, final thoughts about level 1.
I don't mind it, but there is a session cap at 2 or 3 sessions. But outside of that, I think it's a good way to get the party to have better dynamics when it comes to social, combat, the whole 9 yards. And as long as you're playing back the backstories more and focusing more on explaining this is the world, that with the right adventure hook, it can be really, really good. But there's definitely some planning out of your character that you need to have with the session 0. But outside of that, I think it's fine. I don't mind it. So some people hate it. I'm kind of like, it's part of the adventure. It's part of your backstory.
I think we lost Marcos at some point, so we're going to go to Heather. Final thoughts on level 1.
If you're going to start a campaign at level 1, make sure you and all your players are all on the same page as to what's expected of the players coming into level 1 with that character. So that way, kind of hinting back to some of what people have already said already, in that they're not coming with these backstories that make their characters very badass from the very beginning, and everyone's kind of starting on the same page and at the same level, where if you were starting at a higher level, then you could have potentially more of that badassery already built into your character and their development. Other than that, only start at level 1 if you're playing with a group of people who have never played, or it's been a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah, I appreciate that 5th edition D&D, at least specifically, which is what I now have the most experience with, is more lenient and forgiving and more powerful at level 1 than previous editions have been, which is even crazy to think about because it's still kind of weak sauce and a pain in the ass. But older editions, it was like really laughably, horrendously horrible. So I appreciate that they've tried to make it stronger. I'm not a fan of the different class balance, to where some classes are already feeling pretty good at level 1 and others you have to wait until level 2 or even further until level 3 before you really start coming online and getting a feel for what you're doing. I feel like you're very limited on content with level 1, and yet D&D is still a game that is mostly balanced for the lower half of the levels than the higher half. So you'd think that level 1 would have given some more love and attention, but at least according to all the published campaigns, it doesn't quite appear to be the case. From my own experience, it almost feels like you have to start at level 1 as a sense of obligation, but that is certainly a very useful conversation to have with your players. Is like, hey, look, especially if everybody's very experienced with D&D, you can be like, look, here's the campaign plan. You guys can start off as agents of this organization. You're already known each other, and you can start at level like 2 or 3. You've already got your stuff together. Let's hit this campaign with both boots on the ground. I think that could be very viable. But I think it could be viable to start at level 1 if you've got a good reason for it. But I don't feel like you should have to start at level 1 just because it's called level 1 also. All right. This was an awesome discussion. Thank you so much to Sean, Jordan, Marcos, Tiny, and special guest Heather. I am Eric, and I hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion.
Goodbye.